It's my pleasure to welcome our guest today, who has a fascinating story of following her passion from the corporate world to the culinary arts. After graduating, she drove into the fast paced world of tech giants like CZI and Block, where she honed in on her skills in digital marketing, research, and strategy. But a passion for food was always simmering in the background, leading her to make a bold career pivot, trading boardrooms for kitchens and enrolling in the prestigious Le Cordon Bleu in Paris, France. Today, we'll talk about her journey from marketing to culinary artist and how she's cooking up a new recipe for success.
Hey,
Hi.
Welcome, Kaori, to Vinyl to Viral.
Thank you for having
Thank you for joining us all the way in Europe and making the time difference work for us today. We're super excited to have you. And we're really going to talk about your career pivot, but also what you're learning in culinary arts. And your journey is interesting, but I really want to know what was the catalyst for your career transition into the culinary world.
Yeah, so like you mentioned, I graduated from Berkeley in marine science and then actually graduated to COVID, like you obviously.
Yes, Kaori and I went to school together at UC Berkeley. So
yes.
go Bears. Yeah.
Go Bears. And unfortunately, I graduated into COVID and like the job market was terrible and I was never able to find anything in marine science. But it's okay, life went on. And then I just like was doing babysitting, dog walking, just random jobs until one day I landed a marketing coordinator role at Block. It used to be called Square, doing like payment systems. And so that was my first marketing job. Like you mentioned, I then went on to CZ and did science marketing, which tied back to my major a little bit, but really not so much. And I was never had a full-time role. I was a contractor for all the marketing roles I had. And I was very thankful for that opportunity. And I actually quite liked my lifestyle I was able to give me with an office job. But I had always been a passionate home cook since I was 17, 18. It started off single burners in my tiny apartment that Bobbie remembers. I had a microwave and water boiler.
Yeah.
And then got my first real kitchen when I was around like 20, more appliances and stuff like that.
wow.
And it really just drove my passion for cooking. So I was in marketing, all this. I met my husband about 3 years ago and he's French American. And he got laid off and my contract ended within a couple weeks of each other back in 2023. We put our stuff in storage, went to Vietnam for 4 months while looking for marketing, and he was a data scientist. Back in America, I never found anything, and he ended up finding something in Paris. So we came here, we moved here, and I kept trying to look for that marketing job here. And with like struggle of also not speaking French fluently at the time, it was like impossible. I just could not do it. And so I really grew to be very depressed and just confused and angry and all kinds of negative feelings with kind of losing my independence in this new country, and I like can't do anything. And then I was like, wow, I'm just sitting here on my ass, just kind of hanging out for like a year. And I was like, I got to do something. I either going to go apply to marketing school and get an MBA, or just pursue my dream. Well, I didn't even realize it was my dream. That was like a hobby. Or go to culinary school. I talked to some friends that were chefs and they were like, well, seize the moment, you're in Paris. And then that's just what triggered me to apply to Le Cordon Bleu. And it's been life-changing ever since.
That's awesome. And thank you for sharing your story and your vulnerability, because you're right, graduating in an economy during 2020 of that nature was really tough. And a lot of people have felt the same, things around opportunities and are still feeling it, even through the transitions of our government and things like that. So it's very real. I feel a lot of people can relate to that. You talked about not having a kitchen, full kitchen until you're 25. I want to tell a story really quick about us being in Berkeley, because she talked about this little kitchen. I got to set the stage for this because
I need to hear it.
from where we started to being in a full culinary kitchen where you're at now is impressive. So when we were at Berkeley, like many college students, I feel like our audience can relate to this, are broke college students. Like, that's so real. Food stamps and getting all the free resources on campus that you can. And Berkeley had no shame in that. We were sharing all of our secrets on like how to get groceries and how to get free meals and stuff. But when I remember going to Kaori's house, and we moved around a lot during college, like finding little places. But I feel like one of the places that I remember the most is this sort of outhouse, or like a casita in the back of someone else's like big house or off to the side. And it had a cute, double French doors and didn't really have a kitchen. You're right. You just had like the one single, what do you call it? that you plug
The hot
in.
plate.
Oh, hot
Oh,
plate. Yeah,
yeah.
the hot plate. And you were telling me all the things that you made and all the things you would set yourself up for in prepping and so. And so I think about that moment to you being in a full culinary kitchen is amazing, and the fact that you get to experience that is like one in a lifetime.
Yeah, because also what you're not saying about the Bay Area is that, there's not much housing. And so,
Yeah.
so a lot of places were closets or, people just made, to your point, these casitas, these ADUs. And so I could only imagine like the fire hazards or the potential for fire hazards for having a bigger, kitchen in those small, tiny places.
Yeah.
So you got to make do with what you can.
Yeah, there are places that shouldn't have been places. That was like one of my apartments. So it was like, yeah, they just sort of carved out 200 square feet. And I mean, that's what makes great cooks and just great entrepreneurs in general. Having limited resources, like the best entrepreneurs and best people I know make do with what they have.
Story of a lot of diverse food, right?
Yeah.
I'm even from a Black experience. So no, we definitely understand that plight and that reality for so many of us.
Kaori, I have a question for you. How do you blend these techniques now that you've worked with a limited kitchen and now you're in a full-fledged kitchen? What dishes have you made where you're like, I still remember this and I've used this for a long time, but now I've elevated it with something that I've learned through culinary school?
Oh, I actually recently made one, but like Indomie instant noodles. It's a brand of instant noodle. And to tie back to like this like struggle thing and like cultural thing and the use of things without resources. Like a Vietnamese person in San Francisco created garlic noodles. They're like all the crab boils, like rock and crawfish. They have these really simple but delicious garlic noodles.
Mm-hmm.
And they use typically more of like a wheat-based like kind of Italian spaghetti or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
But I use these Indomie noodles instead, which are really reminiscent of my college days. And I still love them to this day. I eat them like at least once a week still. But a technique I learned in culinary school is how to make like a compound butter. So one day we were making crayfish or crawfish type of stew. And we like the crawfish and we crushed it and took all those flavors to a stew. But I was like, I think there's still a lot of flavor in these crushed up shells and scraps. So I brought that home and like put it in some butter and then made a crayfish butter from that.
Mm-hmm.
So I took some of that butter and put it in the Indomie noodles to make my own amplified garlic noodles. So it really reminds me of the Bay and just my younger years of eating these instant noodles all the time.
Yeah, I feel
That's
like
one example.
that's awesome. And that sounds good. I feel like I should have had breakfast before we did this. I mean, you talk about making something, that you're familiar with. And I feel like Filipinos, when we make like ramen, we'll just put garnishes of green onion, or add like shrimp, and it just sort of takes it up, a notch. And I think that's what a lot of the things that we do is we evolve over time and get better, fresher ingredients or whatever the case might be, and staying creative. I want to talk about like the philosophy of food really in culinary school. I'm going to start with this. The one thing to piss me off is to say that Filipino food is unhealthy. That will make me upset every single time. And I actually hear a lot of Filipinos saying the same thing about our own food. And I'm like, are you kidding me? There are so many dishes that have great like bone broths, and great uses of vegetables and stews. I feel like, yes, there are popular foods like fried lumpia, which is great. There are great yummy foods like the lechon, the fried, pork or the roasted pork. But there are other things. And I kind of feel that because of whatever it might be, colonization or... Yeah, you know what? It is colonization that we were brainwashed to thinking that our food and our culture was less than. And another part of it is that through colonization in the Philippines, we were left with scraps and other parts that were unwanted. And so I feel like a lot of chefs today, like in America that I've seen that are Filipino, are revitalizing and rebranding Filipino food as something that is hearty, something that's nutritious, that we can all get behind instead of chastising us and putting us under scrutiny for diabetes, Yeah, exactly. We have James Beard Award winner chefs in Chicago, New York, California. So, Kaori, is that something that you have run into, like being in culinary school, or something that you've sort of thought about while being in school?
I mean, it's definitely, yes, 100%. I will say that I kind of came in here with this preconceived notion of, oh, these French chefs, they're going to think they're the shit. They're going to think French food's the best. And kind of like, the world's view about France and Italy and their food being very high class. So I came in thinking these chefs are going to be like that too. And I've been pleasantly surprised to be in this environment when they're able to admit when they don't really know certain cultures' foods, and they don't leave the impression that they think this is the best. It's just like they're French, they like it, and this is what they're teaching. So they've been very respectful. But it did make me read on my own time and research just lots of things like what Bobbie's mentioning, like all food, like literally name any food item from any country. And if you look up why that food is in that country now and how it's used, it will really tell such an elaborate, rich history of like war, colonization, all kinds of stuff. So yeah, for what Bob would say, I definitely see that a lot. And I learned actually a lot about Vietnamese cuisine. I'm Vietnamese American. And like, it's kind of a funny story because my husband is French American. And when I met him, this is so dumb of me, but in a banh mi sandwich, a Vietnamese banh mi, one of the ingredients is a pate. And then I was talking to him when we first started dating. I was like, hey, have you ever had a banh mi? Have you tried this pate? Not realizing at all that it was a French thing that was brought over during French colonization. And so from that, I just started looking at like, okay, a banh mi, that baguette, that style, although different now from the Vietnamese, is French. And even the use of beef in photos is because the French brought over cows. There's so many things from the Chinese being in Vietnam, the French, the Japanese, that I'm really seeing in the cuisine that tells such a beautiful story of the resilience and the creativity of the Vietnamase people.
I mean, it's dope that you're able to make those types of connections, even from a language perspective. You're saying pate, and I'm thinking because I was one of those only students that took French in high school versus Spanish. And so I'm like, yeah, got the accent mark on the E. That is a French word. Or even you saying baguette, that's that. I love how, again, your own lived experience creates your own story. But then once other people's lived experience come into the play, you realize how much of a community we actually are. So that's dope that, food is being able to tell you those stories as well.
Absolutely.
Have you been able to like see yourself or, your own culture while you're in school? Like what is the relationship between you and culinary school now that you're deep into it and you're almost done?
In a cultural sense, like how am I tying? Oh, the only aspect I see that like kind of crosses my like Vietnamese American heritage with like the French is honestly like the French colonization of Vietnam and like all the impressions that left in the culinary world. But if you're asking like the techniques I'm learning in school, if that has any crossover to the Vietnamese, I would say no.
Well,
Yeah.
I have another question that you're saying is even talking about learning techniques, again, having a full kitchen and probably having utensils and things that you've never even seen or heard of, right? Has there been any meal that you find easier to make now that you have more at your disposal? Or maybe even more difficult because you're so used to maybe an electric versus gas or something like that? Is there a meal that you've even struggled with trying to recreate with all of the things that you have?
I think like because I had these like humble beginnings, starting with like a hot plate, I've cooked with gas, electric, induction, all this stuff has been fine for me. I feel like it's been a great advantage to like not having had as many resources and appliances to work with because now I'm in Paris and my kitchen, I won't bring you over there, but it is tiny. I'm underneath a staircase, and this is just Paris. Like all the kitchens are like horrific. It also tells a story of their history and what they valued. They often had, I guess, I'll basically call it like slaves. It was rich in their culture. And so they didn't give a shit about their kitchens, what it looked like, what they were working in. So they're terribly small, poorly ventilated, poorly lit. And that's very common in even nice apartments sometimes, unless it's renovated. So learning all these different techniques with all the new tools I have is definitely a plus, but hasn't been super necessary, luckily.
I love seeing your stories on your Instagram or your TikTok because you do a great job of documenting your experience at school and then taking, if it's like leftovers or scraps or recreating it at home. And sometimes I see like what you'll make at school versus what you've made at home. And I'm like, oh, your home loan looks fire. Like that's the one that like I want to eat.
I want to go into that kitchen.
Yeah, exactly. What do you think about the things that you've made at school versus how you recreate things at home?
Yeah, a lot of the school dishes that we learn are very like vintage older recipes that are created a long time ago and more meant to focus on a specific technique, like how to break down an entire chicken, how to fillet a fish, how to make this French sauce. And it's true, it's not really my preference and taste, and I don't really cook this at home very much. So it's nice to be able to have the scraps or the technique of breaking down a whole chicken and then taking that learned thing back home with me.
Yeah.
But yeah, I prefer cooking with more color and more spices at home typically.
Okay. Well, Now that we talked about home cook, we talking about TikTok, Instagram, and all of those things. You've created your own path to success outside of the go to college, get a job formula. How do you advise younger people who feel pressured to follow that traditional route?
Honestly, so I went to community college first for 2 to 3 years before I even got into Berkeley, and luckily was able to get a scholarship. So luckily, I don't have any debt, but I know friends that have gone through this and have debt, and they chose to do this or because of the pressure of society without really knowing what they wanted to even major in. So I would really suggest, explore everything you want, your hobbies, your interests, even if it goes outside of this like traditional college route. I would say go for it as long as you could try to stay out of debt. Seems like a good idea.
Oh, that is a great idea.
Yeah, that's like I think a theme everyone can follow because that's kind of the trap that keeps us not to the next place.
Especially in California. That's something that I learned in California, different from growing up in Chicago or New York, right? Where that Cal system allowed or didn't have a negative connotation necessarily on the community college route into, Berkeley and UCLA and USC and all of those places. And so I wish it was elevated, or at least the California experience, being able to be exposed to folks that are outside of California, because outside of California, we're like community college. That feels, especially in families, like that's a letdown.
Really?
But I've seen in California, and even listening to your story, is that no, that can be a better avenue than saying taking a year off to just explore yourself, right?
Yeah.
I think, being in community college also allows for that flexibility and being able to be exposed to more things. So I really do love that point, and I really wish that more people started to emulate that Cal system.
And now community college is free in California. So we're really celebrating that and getting kids more opportunities by just doing that.
And more parents need to hear that.
Yeah.
You don't have to go to just the PWIs and, the top 10, top 25 schools out there. There are various other paths that, many of us are able to navigate to our own levels of success.
Yeah. And Kaori, I feel like when I met you, you were involved in so many things at school. You're saying, just go for it, test out different things. And that's so true to your nature. And it doesn't surprise me that you've made these pivots and have made it work for yourself. Like, even if you had to pivot, each time is still a win because you're still here today, right? When she was at school, you were in the racing team, like the Berkeley racing team. Is that correct?
Oh, yeah, the F1 team.
Yeah, we had an F1 team at Berkeley
shoot.
that she was a part of. She also rode a motorcycle and had a bike. And I was just like, oh, this chick, she's just coming in school on her bike. And it was so dope. And then we were part of Cal Hawaii together. So we danced together and did Polynesian dancing. And then she talks about being in, marine biology. So there are all these different interests. And I just always knew she was badass. And in my head, you're just good at everything. Like there's nothing that Kaori can't do. If she wanted to be an F1 with Bianca Bustamante and be part of the engineering team, she could totally do that. But now she's in Paris. And I'm just like, yeah, this makes sense, for you. And I think that also breaks some of that societal pressure that we tell kids of just there's this traditional route that's safety proof. What we found in our generation, that this traditional route that everyone was trying to enforce on us is not safe anymore. Like what's safe is knowing that you've got yourself, number one, and two, that you can pivot. You can create and start to use those pivot muscles and know that one, things are figure outable, and two, you're going to be okay. Like, we're going to figure this out. I was like, that's, I think, the most like mindset driven principle we have to instill in like young kids.
Dope. First of all, when you start your restaurant, you know who to get as your publicist, because this is pretty, I love this interaction because, again, you're able to pull even more of her story out for the rest of us. But speaking on that, what if you could create your own restaurant? What would that be?
I have always had this idea. I had two ideas related to cuisine that I really want to do. If I want to do a restaurant, I would want to do an Asian fusion thing and really elevate those flavors. Like I would start in Vietnamese because that's what I know. But there's so many Vietnamese dishes, like kind of Bobbie was saying about Filipino food, that people in America and the Western world just don't know about. There's so much more than banh mi and pho that is just so vibrant, delicious, and bright that people just don't know. So I would have a restaurant that really highlights that part of it. And I would also love to just write little snippets of the history of why these ingredients are incorporated, where it came from, and all of that. That's one idea. My other culinary idea is if I were to do content creation, I would love to show one plate of food and the entire process of how every single one of those components gets onto your your plate. If there's beef on it, we're going to see what that looks like, and like, so we can stop being so disconnected from where our food comes from. It's like really seeing what's going on. I think it'd be really interesting as well.
A more cultural version of like farm to table.
Exactly. Like a real version of farm to table. You know what I mean? Not a cute little radish being picked and brought over.
Go from my garden to, my counter.
That's really, really dope because then you can have so many other folks get tied into that, right? Like we were talking about the galleon trade and different slave trades and those things in terms of, or even I think about Oaklandish in one of the shirts of no immigrant, no spice, right? So again, without some of those trade ships coming through here, we don't even know where some of this stuff comes from. So that would really be cool to be like, nah, but really really originated back in wherever that country or city might have been or province.
Yeah. And I think it's such a blend of your experiences too. I mean, we see just a lot of, I see a lot of content creators that have been creating on YouTube, TikTok, Instagram, for the past few years, and they've gotten great brand deals and partnerships and collaboration. What I love about your journey is you could have done that and you can still do that. And you decided to still go to culinary school and be like, you know what? I just need this little extra thing of credibility or just something to like keep me going. What takes us to the next level? And I'm glad that you were able to find a new space to put your own spin on it. Because you could still totally do all of those things that you said. Yeah.
I think that's the beauty of this whole, vinyl to viral thing, the generations and seeing the generational excellence come out. I think we see that a lot more now because of social media and all of the things instead of like old folks blocking, right? Or being like, no, we're going to sit in this chair. Like we didn't even get our chance until we were 55. So I'm going to sit here for the next 30 years versus, you all coming in and almost busting through the doors. Like, oh, you think that this is the only door I can go through? Check out my YouTube, check out my, TikTok, check out my Instagram. So that's pretty dope. And I hope more of you actually take advantage of that stuff too.
Yeah. Well, you're in Paris now. I want to talk a little bit more about the future and where you see yourself after culinary school.
The truth is, like, to back up a little bit, when I made the choice to join culinary school, I know I don't love French cuisine. So I knew I wasn't going to take these techniques and necessarily bring every single one home and do this as a home cook. And I was very scared, and it was a financial thing, this whole new world for me. What I learned, I think the most from culinary school is that you don't know what the end result is going to look like. And right now, I still don't know what the end is going to be except for just graduating. But I've created a community, and I found opportunities and doors opening that I would have never known unless I took that first step. So any question about any advice to young people, it's like, you don't have to necessarily have such a rigid goal. But if you put yourself in this new environment, and you're open and you're engaged, doors will open for you and you seek those out too. So that's something that I've really learned from this. And to answer your question, like at the end of this, I'm not exactly sure, but for the first time in my life, I'm not scared. Whatever I do, I know I'm going to succeed, and I'm very excited and not fearful of my future for once. So very excited for that.
That's awesome. I mean, our audience has to follow your Instagram, and we'll link and share that, with our folks too, to see your cooking online, but also your journey in culinary school. People will be left hungry. People will be left curious. And I think people will continue to see themselves in the way that you even talk about food and culture and cuisine. You just make it so accessible and fun and exciting and fresh. I feel like that's what keeps people intrigued when we're talking about food and culture and being whole.
And another thing that I'm intrigued about, like learning about different chefs and stuff. Even my grandfather was a chef when I was growing up. And if there was a meal that really defined who you are, what meal would that be?
Oh, okay. I'm going to show you. I don't know how this will look through a screen. I have been to Vietnam many times and went there growing up and stuff. And I recently made this dish. Can you see that? This is just a river shrimp that I've cut open and like broiled for a little bit of time. And that's very like traditional in Vietnam because the entirety of Vietnam is basically coastal. So I would go there with my family, just catch shrimp and grill it right there on the beach. And this one's also interesting because a lot of people like to have laughing cow cheese on it. It's like that processed kind of cheap cheese.
Yeah.
That's very popular in Vietnam because of the French. And because of Vietnam's heat and humidity, it became very popular in Vietnam as it didn't spoil very easily. So we still eat that a lot to this day. The thing underneath it is called bun cot. I know that's not really looking so good.
We'll show a picture of it when you talk about it.
Okay,
Yeah.
cool. That's a very common street food in Vietnam. So I've had this many times. It's like at the night markets, all that stuff. It's basically made out of rice flour, coconut milk, and a little turmeric. And it's fried into these little these tiny dome shapes with like green onion, shrimp, or pork in it, like whatever you want. And they're just, you eat it with nuc dum, and it's just such a flavor bomb in your mouth. It has texture, acidity. I really love that component and how it's really ties to street food of Vietnam. And then the final piece on this thing is a sugar cane steamed shrimp mixture, lemongrass shrimp on a little sugar cane. And that was really tied back to the history of Vietnam and like the Nguyen dynasty, which is like royalty. And this is something that would share at big events during the royal times or during celebrations. And you could really chew on that sugar cane after to release the sugar. And I love showing this to people because they've never heard of this and they've never had this experience of eating. So this is my favorite thing to make and show friends.
Sold.
Yeah.
Sign
No,
me
when
up.
I saw that, I was like,
here.
I wish I was your neighbor.
Bobbie.
I wish I was able to stop by. Those are like the best kind of neighbors to have, is like people that love to cook and love to cook for other people and share, stories like that.
Like I would be that willing. What do you
Like a
even
test-
call them?
a
Yeah,
test person?
like nobody wants to go into barber school, right? Get your hair cut in barber school because they are tearing your head up. But like the way you're explaining what you're making, and even the sugar cane takes me back to even my ancestry, Black, and even in the islands, right? You to Jamaica, all of that.
Yes.
So it's taking me home. But yeah, I would love to be if it's called a tester, sign me up. If you ever are coming back this way, once you leave France and you need that for this restaurant or food or whatever it is that you create, I will come to your home. I will sit outside. I will serve me from the window. Just sign me up.
I know you said you kind of have it's sort of up in the air. What's next after culinary school? Have you thought about coming back to the States or at least staying in Europe?
I've definitely thought about coming back to the States. I think that's probably going to be what I do next. And in terms of what I'm actually going to do there, I don't know. But yeah, I do think I want to come back. I cannot handle another winter here. It's very difficult as a California girl to like experience it. And I don't want to do it again.
Well, when you open your restaurant, you do your food pops-ups, let us know. We'll be there.
She's your publicist.
Oh yeah, I got great stories. And I just believe in you so much because of who you are and the skill sets you have. And I'm like, she could say tomorrow she wants to, be part of NASA, and I would not be surprised because she's an engineer. In my head, she's an engineer and she's a cook. So it's all these things. She's a food scientist. Kaori, thank you so much for being here with us today and sharing, your experience and being vulnerable with us, because there's a lot of us that have, like I said, graduated during hard times and have got laid off and are trying to figure out our pivot. But what you've resorted to is like taking a chance on yourself. And I think that's something that everyone can get behind. So
Great. Thank you.
thank you.
This might be one of my favorites of our season. So I can't wait for everybody else to hear about your journey, because that's one of the biggest things that we want to bring to our listeners and to our audiences, right? Like various forms of success through different types of leaders. And I look forward to your leadership in the culinary field.
Oh, this is so sweet. You both have been really, really so nice to talk to. And thank you for making me feel so comfortable. I was nervous to like do a podcast. Never done this. So thank you both. And Bobbie, you're such a good friend. And you talk about me, and you've always been a good friend. So thank you so much for being you, honestly.
Oh, that makes well, thank you. The last thing I have on our agenda today is just tell us how we can support you. Socials or any other projects we can get behind. Let us know.
I do. It's called the Wild Sprig Kitchen. The sprig is like a sprig of thyme. I found that a lot of people don't know what the word sprig is and think it's a typo to say spring, but it's Wild Sprig Kitchen.
Well, we'll make sure we include that when we share our podcast out.
The end.
Yeah.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much, Kaori.